Bhagavate Vasudevaya. The word Diwali is derived from the Sanskrit Deepa Bali, which literally means a deepa is a lamp, a lighted lamp. And Bali literally means in a line, like it's a line of lights. But from the most ancient of times, it wasn't really about the lights. It's like saying Independence Day in some country and they have fireworks. That's called the Festival of Fireworks, when it really is about something else, the gaining of independence. So, unfortunately, particularly over the last about 50 years, there has been this move away from the older and very sacred traditions to becoming more worldly, and it's just about party time. And so people refer to it sometimes as Indian New Year, but actually it's not the case. The origins of this celebration has its roots in an extraordinary series of events that took place in the most ancient of times. We're talking about seriously ancient. During that time, there was an extraordinary personality who had taken birth in Ayodhya. This personality, his name, he was known as Rama, Sri Rama, or Lord Ramachandra. He had taken birth as the son of a great and very powerful king that had a very extensive empire. And as was the tradition in those times, because of the nature of things, kings very often had more than one wife, because they were frequently engaged, well, not too frequent, but often engaged in having to defend their kingdoms or even expand their kingdoms, which of course was always done through brute force, very much as it is in the world up until this time. And in those days, the kings and their sons, they didn't stay back and send all their men forward into battle. That was considered like incredibly cowardly. And so you generally see the kings at the very front of the battle. They were often the first one to make contact with an enemy force. And because of this code of chivalry, you would have quite high amounts of mortality amongst the heirs to kingdoms. So it was not unusual for kings, and it was considered permissible for them to have more than one wife. This particular king, he had 3 wives. And amongst between his 3 wives, he had 3 principal sons. And Rama he'd manifest this extraordinary countenance and mentality and behavior. And he was accepted as being an incarnation of God by the people. He was like absolutely extraordinary. Everybody was like deeply in love with him. And so when the king announced that he was going to name Rama the regent prince, meaning that he would be the one to inherit the throne, everybody was totally happy with that, except one person, and that was one of his wives. She had many years before performed some extraordinary and wonderful service to her husband, the king. And he, in a moment of great affection for her, told her, "Ask me for anything, and I will give it to you." And of course, in those days, people, their word of honor was like everything. You would give up everything for your word. Anything that you said, that was done, no matter what it cost you when you gave your word. And so the queen said, "I don't have anything to ask now. Allow me to ask sometime in the future." And the king said, "So be it." She, in the meantime, became influenced by an incredibly unpleasant person who poisoned her mind and convinced her that it should rightfully be her own son who became the king. And so when this announcement was made that Sri Ram was going to become the regent prince, this person influenced her to this degree. She said, "Now you must utilize this gift, this boon that you've been offered. You must approach your husband and tell him that your son, Bharata, must become the king, and Rama, in order to keep everything peaceful, needs to be sent into exile for 14 years, so he doesn't have anything to do with stuff." And she was kind of like not totally into it in the beginning, but she became persuaded. And so when she asked this of her husband, he literally collapsed. He was so overwhelmed with grief, torn between this, thing that you just cannot go back on your word. You cannot. You must be truthful always. And then having such love for Rama and not wanting to see this cruel thing happen to him. So he became, he was almost comatose. He couldn't function. He was having a tremendous breakdown. And when Rama inquired what was wrong with the father, he came to hear about what had happened. And so he approached his own father, and to alleviate his tremendous suffering, he told his father that "I would gladly embrace this so that you don't suffer in this way. Voluntarily, and I will accept this." And the father was just absolutely distraught. And so it came to pass that Rama would go into exile. Along with him, he would be accompanied by his wife, who was the most extraordinary lady, Sita Devi, and a fully transcendental personality, and his brother, Lakshman. And so the brother that was to be named the regent prince, he had been away visiting, and when he returned and came to hear of this, he was shocked, and he verbally really attacked his mother and said, that he completely rejected her for what she had done, and that this was so evil that he loved his brother, not just as a brother, but as this extraordinary, transcendental personality. And so he didn't want to accept the reality of these things, and Rama convinced him that it was fine, it's okay, we must accept this. This is the hand that fate has dealt us, so we must simply embrace it. And so Rama and Lakshman and Sita were taken to the outskirts of the city in the king's finest chariot. And when the people heard what was happening, they all wanted to leave their homes and travel with him throughout his exile. That was the degree of influence that he had and how much he was loved. And he, of course, had to tell everybody to go back. It was like the most unbelievably devastating time for the entire city. And it was a very great city. So Rama took up this exile in the forest that was to last for 14 years. And as part of that exile, it meant to also go barefoot and just, live in the most simple fashion. There is a great spiritual epic called the Ramayana that was compiled by, the one by Valmiki is considered to be the most authorized narration of this tremendous epic. And this story is told about the time that he spends in this exile and the tremendous difficulties that were faced. And towards the end of the exile, his wife, Sita Devi, was kidnapped by a mystical ruler who had tremendous power. His name was Ravana. And she was spirited off to Sri Lanka, where Ravana had his kingdom was based. And then there was this event where a huge battle ensued, and Ravana was killed by Rama in this battle, and Sita was rescued. And this coincided with the time for the end of his exile. And so he had decided that it was now time to return to Ayodhya. He was not entirely sure what the situation was, and so somebody had gone ahead to see what was the prevailing sentiment. And he was told that everybody is eagerly awaiting his return. And so there is a description in this Ramayana of a mystical airship that was lent to Rama by Kuvera, this great mystical personality that was considered amongst the devas or the demigods. And mounting this, it describes that it was actually made of flowers and it flew in the air due to this great mystical ability that had been invested in it by Kuvera. And so he returned to Ayodhya, and everybody was just like overwhelmed. It was like they had regained their life. In great humility, he approached his mother first, bowing before her. he approached his stepmother, who had sent him into exile, and bowed before her and embraced her in a mood of wonderful forgiveness. By this time, she had had a complete transformation and was filled with regret for what had happened. But there was something really wonderful that had transpired. When Rama first entered the forest, Bharata decided that he wanted to try and convince him to come back. And so he left for the forest also, and had to bring men with him to try and track where it was that he was staying in the deep part of the forest. Rama was living amongst some of the great yogis and sages that resided there. And he approached Rama and he begged him to return. And Rama said that I cannot. My father had given his word. When Rama left, his father gave up his life. He could not continue. He was so distraught. Bharata said, well, if this is my kingdom now, I want to give it to you and nobody can stop me. So please accept it and come back. And Rama said, no, that would be not the right thing to do. I had accepted this situation, and to remain always virtuous and follow what is true, I will continue with this. And so Bharata told him, but I have no capacity to rule. I'm not that intelligent and not very qualified. How will I prevent this great kingdom from going into utter destruction? And Rama told him, because you are manifesting such humility, this is the foundational qualification, and because of that you will find a way to do it. So Bharata, he had brought with him some wooden slippers, sandals, that were inlaid with gold. And he told Rama that if I am to rule, then I will rule as your servant. Kindly take these shoes and wear them. Then I will bring them with me, and I will always consider myself a servant of even your shoes. And Rama was very pleased with him and did step into the sandals for a moment, then sat down. And Bharata now carried them on his head. And when he returned to Ayodhya, he placed the sandals, the wooden slippers, on a cushion on top of the throne. He himself would sit on a cushion on the floor in order to administer the kingdom. And the whole time he lived in a small hut outside of the palace. He wouldn't even live in the palace. And so when Rama returned, Bharata came forward and offered him the slippers, and they embraced and wept in great joy. So Rama was now, there was this monumental festival. And to welcome Lord Rama back into this great city of Ayodhya, the people lit these lamps and lined them along the tops of the roofs and on the streets and everywhere. And it was a welcome of light to defeat darkness, of goodness to overcome evil, for truth to always prevail over untruth, even in spite of great challenges and difficulties. When I first went to India, I was really, it was quite extraordinary. I was living as a monk, and we would sometimes travel in some of the smaller villages and cities, and nobody had television. Nobody had other forms of entertainment. And usually in the center of each village, there was a temple, which was the center of village life. And in the evening, you would have priests who would read out these great epics, the stories. And from time to time, you would have these traveling bands of musicians and actors who would put on these dramas, like they would retell the whole story over 15 days, every night. And the whole village would come out, and the kids. And so everybody sort of like were really immersed in their daily life in that which is deeply spiritual and that which is deeply good. And I felt so disturbed when I started seeing over the years of going back to India, all the satellite dishes showing up. Because prior to this, people dance. Dance is not just, some fancy cultural thing. It's deeply spiritual. Everything has a deep spiritual significance. So in people's life, from the time they woke up and saw the sunrise and measured the sandhya, the three, divisions of the day, when they looked into the sky at night, everything had a deep spiritual significance. And there was this constant awareness that I am a transient. This body is not who I am. I am an eternal spiritual being. I am the Atma, residing within this body. I find myself in this embodied condition. I should live a righteous life. I should do what is good. And I should help others also grow in spiritual understanding and awareness, because this is where people will actually experience true and deep spiritual happiness. But over the time, you see the great influence of the Western consumer culture that has absolutely and utterly pervaded the world. And the use of all this, psychological manipulation. People gained knowledge of this over the last century and have used it to just simply direct you and tell you. They tell you what to want, what is valuable, what is right, what is good, and it's all for the purpose of harvesting money from you. It's shocking. It's incredible what's happened, where we find ourselves. And so these wonderful festivals, spiritual festivals, were times for people to reconnect and to remember and to reflect on their own life and consider, what do I need to be doing in my life? So it is more full of light, it is more full of love, it is more full of truth, it is more full of spiritual reality. And these frequent and extraordinary spiritual festivals that, peppered the whole year were for this purpose of helping people remain focused in this way and not become like we are today, unfortunately. So that's the background. That is the origin and roots. Of course, in much of the world now, Diwali is celebrated as if it was New Year, where it's just party time and fireworks and alcoholic beverages and just hedonism, things that take you away from your spiritual being and identity, things that take you away from the potential for the greatest form of spiritual good and happiness. Okay, any question? Was that good? That was like a little, this is such a short thing of something that are just monumentally vast and incredibly wonderful. When you look at many of the old Shastra, especially the Puranas were a part of the Vedic literature that was meant for common people, not for high thinkers and scholars and stuff. This was for common people. And it was filled with stories of great saintly kings, of saintly personalities, of people that came from the most ordinary circumstances and became extraordinary spiritual personalities. And people would just, be constantly immersed, and they read to their children and amongst each other share these things because they were wonderful, wonderful reminders of truth and filled with great spiritual inspiration and instruction. Thank you very much. So tonight I will sing also the Maha Mantra.